Okay, so let's talk about the ever sexy topic of cold email throttling in Infusionsoft. And in case you aren't familiar, let me tell you first what cold email throttling is. So let's say you import a list into Infusionsoft and you want to send a broadcast message to them or add them to a campaign. Well, the very first message that's going to go to that audience, Infusionsoft is going to take it upon themselves to throttle that broadcast. And what that means is they're going to allow you to send out the first portion of it. So let's say it's a list of 10,000 people. They'll send out the first 1,000 emails, but they're going to hold off on the remaining 9,000 to see if that first 1,000 opens it, reports it as spam, deletes it, interacts with it, clicks links on it. They're basically just going to send a test portion before they send the remainder. And there's a few different reasons for that, okay? But that is cold email throttling in a nutshell. And if you aren't aware of it, then maybe you've never encountered it. Or maybe it just wasn't an issue, so you didn't notice, right? It only becomes an issue if you don't know about it and it catches you off guard. Okay, so the next logical question is, when does cold email throttling happen? And there are two circumstances under which Infusionsoft might throttle your emails. So the first I just mentioned, it's if you import a new list. If you bring an audience into Infusionsoft and you have not emailed them yet. So the first email to that group is going to be throttled, right? It doesn't matter if you import them today and you email them tomorrow, or if you imported them 6 months ago and your first email to them is today. The first time you email that list, your Infusionsoft account is going to say, hang on, I haven't emailed these people yet, so let's do it kind of slowly just to see how they react. The second time you might experience cold email throttling is if you go a long time between sending emails to a prospect. So if it's been 3 or 4 months, I think the rule is 4 months, and you haven't emailed that particular prospect, well, then the next time you email them, it's going to throttle that broadcast or that message because, well, they're cold at that point. Okay, so let's talk about cold email throttling and why it exists. Why is it even a thing, right? Why would Infusionsoft prevent you from sending an email that you want to send out, okay? And before I dig into the explanation, I need to acknowledge that I used to work at Infusionsoft, and I explained this to people on a regular basis, and I wanted to make sure I got it right, so I talked to the email compliance team there several different times to make sure that my understanding was thorough. And here's the deal, right? It is for your benefit. If they prevent you from sending out an email, they're helping you. And I know it doesn't feel that way, but hear me out. Infusionsoft sends billions of emails, that's billions with a B, every single year, okay? And in doing so, they've learned that under certain circumstances, contacts are much more likely to mark your emails as spam. And two of those circumstances are A, brand new contacts, and B, contacts who haven't been emailed in more than 4 months. So under those circumstances, they said, hey, the likelihood that these contacts are going to mark your email as spam is way higher. So in order to mitigate that risk, in order to help manage the number of spam complaints that you might get and therefore they might get, they're going to go ahead and implement that throttling. Okay, so let's say you have a list of 10,000 people and you want to send them an email. Infusionsoft is going to send to the first 1,000 people, and then it's going to wait. And the reason it's waiting is it's trying to see what number of spam complaints that first 1,000 produce. The reason that's important is because if it produces one spam complaint, then the next 9,000 they can guess is going to produce 9 spam complaints, 1 for every 1,000, and that's totally within the acceptable threshold for them. But if that first 1,000 produces 100 spam complaints, then they can kind of guess that the next 9,000 is going to produce 900, and that's way too many spam complaints for you or for them. And so the reason I say it's a benefit for you is because your ability to deliver emails is directly tied to the reputation of your domain. So when you send an email and it's from @monkeypodmarketing.com, when somebody marks that email as spam, there is a kind of a strike or an X mark against my domain, monkeypodmarketing.com. And it doesn't matter if I go use a different email marketing program, my domain carries that reputation with it. So Infusionsoft is protecting your domain by preventing circumstances where you might get too many spam complaints. Now, just to be clear, they're also protecting their own deliverability, right? Infusionsoft uses servers, right? And if you send emails, you're using their servers. So if somebody marks an email as spam, it not only affects your domain, but it also affects Infusionsoft's servers. So they're doing their job to make sure that they can get emails delivered. Because at the end of the day, Infusionsoft is in the email marketing game, and if they're not able to get emails delivered, then their business is probably going to struggle, right? Now, the third benefit to them throttling is it helps me, and it helps you, and it helps everyone else, right? Because those servers are shared. So think about that, right? Let's say there are 10 people, right? And all of them use the same Infusionsoft server. There's way more than 10 people using each Infusionsoft server, but let's just say 10. Well, if 5 of them start sending a bunch of spam, right? Infusionsoft is going to get some spam complaints, and those customers are going to get spam complaints against their reputation. But the other 5 users who didn't send any emails that were marked as spam, they're going to experience lower deliverability as well, because the servers that they use are shared with people who aren't practicing good email sending habits or policies, right? So it really is in your best interest, in their best interest, and in everybody's mutual best interest to throttle emails that are under the circumstances where you might get more spam complaints. So the next question we should answer here is this a big deal, right? I hear people complain about the cold email throttling from time to time, and the reality is it's only a big deal if you don't know it's going to happen. So if you have a time-sensitive message and you need to get it out to your audience because you've got a promotion going on today, or you have an event tomorrow, or there's something that you need to tell them about, and Infusionsoft decides to throttle your message at that moment, well, yeah, it's a big inconvenience, and it's probably super annoying because it's your account and your audience, and you should be able to send emails however you like. But most of the time, it's not that big a deal, because it only happens under 2 circumstances: brand new lists or people you haven't emailed in 4 or more months. And if you run a business and you have email marketing as part of your way of engaging with people, you shouldn't wait 4 months between emailing them. So you should be emailing them on a regular basis. And if you import a list and you know cold email throttling is a thing, well, then you should plan to send your first message to them that isn't time sensitive. So send them a follow-up if they just attended your event, or send them a welcome message if they're new to your business, or send them something that can go out at whatever rate Infusionsoft allows it to go out, so that you don't have to suffer the frustrations that come along with a time-sensitive message and then the throttling kicking in. Okay? So I don't think this is that big of a deal, because to me, it feels like it's really easy to avoid. It only happens under 2 circumstances, and both of which are pretty easy to prepare for. But I recognize that, when you need to send an email, you need to send an email, and I get the frustration that comes along with not being able to do so. Okay, so the last question here that I want to address is, hey, what should I do about it, right? If email throttling is a thing, what can I do? And I want to call out that there are some workarounds. If you ask this question, you'll hear people say, oh, just split your list into 10 smaller groups and send a broadcast to each one, and you won't experience throttling at all because each one will go out, and whatever workarounds you might hear or come up with, it's a bad idea, because throttling exists to protect you. So if you're going around that throttling, you're just increasing your own risk. You're just absorbing that likelihood that you're going to have a negative impact or an adverse impact on your reputation, on Infusionsoft's reputation, and maybe on mine. So please don't do that. If there are workarounds and you hear about them, just please avoid those. Now, there are some exceptions, right? I understand that if you are using a different program, right, and you've been emailing regularly and practicing good habits, and you bring them into Infusionsoft, that technically shouldn't be a cold list, because you have been emailing them. They're expecting communication from you, and they have a relationship with you, that sort of thing. So I get that there are some times when it's an inconvenience, and that's where I'm going to fall back on the fact that you should just avoid time-sensitive messages as your first message. So if you know you're importing a new list, send an email to them that just says, hey, we've switched marketing platforms. Our emails might have a different look and feel. Here's what you should expect, right? Just do what you can to send something out to your audience every 4 months or when you import a list, so that cold email throttling won't become an impediment for you.